Hi, this is your buddy Quinn, and I'm here to introduce the 1997 Italian film Life is Beautiful uh, by director Roberto Benigni. This is a really fun film. It is a comedy and it is also a tragedy. It's a film about the joys of life, the horrors of the Holocaust, and trying to blend those two things together in a film is tricky business. And I think Benigni does a really lovely job at it personally. Ultimately, Life is Beautiful is a film about love and how you love, uh, the way that love changes the outcome of stories. What does it mean to love deeply and creatively? So I think this film appeals to a really wide audience. This is an Italian film that is set in the 1930s and 40s. That was a very difficult period of time in Italy, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about the Italian context in World War II, and then turn to a discussion of the production, directors, actors, and then some of the themes that I think this film does a really great job of introducing. The film starts in the 1930s, and it's set in the Kingdom of Italy. Many people don't remember that Italy used to be a kingdom because it's been a republic for quite a long time. But there was a Kingdom of Italy that lasted for about 85 years, all the way up until the end of World War II, after which Mussolini was killed and Italy becomes a republic. And so the film starts off in the Kingdom of Italy, and there are references in the film to princes and princesses, which made sense in that context. Benito Mussolini, most famous for joining an alliance with Adolf Hitler in World War II, and also for being a major proponent of the doctrine of fascism as a political ideology, led Italy in the latter part of that kingdom from 1922 to 1943 for about 20 years. Fascism, as Mussolini practiced it, and as Hitler also practiced it with some other additional innovations, is a political ideology that essentially asserts the need for a strong state, a strong central government that controls society. Sometimes it's equated to an ideology that supports totalitarianism or a very vigorous authoritarianism. And the reason that fascism argues that society needs to be controlled that way is that uh, you might be in economic distress, there might be a security threat, and for a country to manage the challenges that it faces, a really strong state and strong government are necessary to do that. And as Italy came out of World War I, it did face a great number of challenges, and fascism rose to the challenge, much as it did in World War II, or in Germany leading up to World War II, as a promise of hope to help people get out of their situation through a strong state. Uh, Italy essentially becomes a fascist dictatorship earlier than Germany does. It becomes a fascist dictatorship by the end of the 1920s. And in the later 1930s, which is when the story of this film begins, Mussolini, who's ruling Italy, is pursuing a very aggressive foreign colonial policy, which includes the invasion and ultimately the conquest of Abyssinia, which is also known as Ethiopia. Italy had tried to conquer Ethiopia a couple of times. It finally does conquer it in 1937 after a major effort, although after World War II, it's not going to be able to maintain control. Around that time that Ethiopia is conquered, Mussolini decides essentially to become a racist. He wasn't historically a racist, and he often sent mixed messages about race, but his alliance with Hitler, who was a very deep racist, led him to promote racist policies in Italy as well, primarily for political reasons. And he endorses in 1938 what becomes known as a Manifesto on Race. This Manifesto on Race, which is signed by a variety of scientists from Italy, leads to a change in the law that year, which leads to a series of laws that are now known as the racial laws. And the government manifesto on race encourages Italians very openly to be racist. And it asks them to distinguish between Aryans, people from an Aryan race, which would be mainstream Italians, from the Jews that populated many of Italy's urban centers, and also from Africans, which Italy now had a strong connection to after the conquest of Ethiopia. And the racial laws are very punitive. They start to strip Jews of Italian citizenship. They begin to remove them from professional positions and confiscate their property. And we begin to see the implications of that set of racial laws in this film. As the 40s began, Germany essentially has to come to the aid of Italy against Allied pressure, and it invades its ally, Italy, in September 1943 and occupies it. Mussolini is still technically in charge. The Germans essentially rescue him and try to keep him in charge. But this period of German occupation of Italy lasts for about 20 months until the German defeat in Italy in May 1945. And so that period of the German occupation of Italy is the period where most of the film takes place. During this period, Mussolini is captured. We don't see that in the film, but he's ultimately killed by the Italian resistance movement. And as the Germans begin to flee, it sets the stage for the Italian Republic after the war, and the Allies come in and occupy Italy. And essentially, Italy transforms into a new post-war government. So that's a little bit of the context that I think would be helpful in understanding many of the references throughout the film. As far as the director, Roberto Benigni is the director, but he also does a lot more. He is the main actor in the film. He co-writes the screenplay for this film. Benigni is a comedic stage actor in Italy that is very multi-talented. He has been in TV productions, he's directed films, he's acted in a lot of films, and he spent a lot of time on stage as well. He particularly loves Dante's Divine Comedy, which I think has some potentially metaphorical references to this film, because in Divine Comedy and Dante, you essentially descend into various circles of hell. And Dante thinks of it as a comedy, right? But it also has tragic elements to it, and it reflects much of the spirit of Life is Beautiful as well. But after this film, Benigni did a traveling stage performance all about Dante, and knows the Divine Comedy by heart, which is a major accomplishment. Benigni's connection to the film is also quite personal. So in addition to playing all of these roles, it has relevance for him and his family history. He's not Jewish himself, but his father was part of the Italian army that was essentially thrown into a labor camp during the German occupation. And he spent 2 years in that labor camp. And Benigni talks a little bit about how his father, in discussing that period of time when he was in a German labor camp, used to tell comedic stories about it to try not to frighten the children or to try to shield them from some of the more worrisome details of his experience there. The film is also inspired by quite a well-known book that Benigni liked a lot by an Italian Holocaust survivor. His name is Rubino Salmoni, and he was sent to Auschwitz and survived long enough in Auschwitz, a place that not that many people left, survived long enough to be rescued by an Allied invasion. And he tells that story in his memoir also in quite comedic detail. And so those two accounts fuse for Benigni as he writes the screenplay and directs this film into something where he's building on memoirs of Italian Jews, but also memoirs from his own family. The main actress in this film is a wonderful actress named Nicoletta Braschi. She is actually married to the main actor in the film and director, Roberto Benigni. So they end up married in this film, but they're also married in real life and have been for a number of years by the time this film is made. She's a great actress, and I think you'll enjoy her role in the film. Another important child actor appears in this film, the son of this couple. The son's name is Josue or Joshua. Is played by a 5-year-old actor, Giorgio Cantorini, and also does a great job. So we have a core family that is at the center of the plot of this. We have Guido as the principal actor, or as the principal character, Dora as his love interest, and ultimately his wife, and then their son, Joshua. So what makes this film special? Well, it certainly resonates with a lot of people. It's very well awarded, and it did very well commercially. This film won the Oscar for Best Foreign Language Film, I think in 1999, and it also was the Oscars in which Benigni won a Best Actor Oscar. And this was the first time that the Best Actor Oscar went to somebody acting in a foreign language. Sophia Loren had achieved that many years before in Best Actress category, but Benigni was the first Best Actor. He was famously over jubilant at the awards ceremony, and I'll include a link to the awards ceremony clip in the notes on YouTube for this as well. The film also won the grand prize at the Cannes Film Festival. In 2001, excuse me, in Italy, it was shown on TV, on the main Italian TV station, and 30% of the entire country tuned in to watch it. So this is a film that's extremely well known in Italy, not just abroad, and is considered to be part of Italy's cultural heritage. It is the most watched film ever on Italian television. Life is Beautiful also walks a fine line, as I mentioned, between comedic and tragic narration of the Holocaust. This is controversial in some circles. Another 2019 film tries to do this as well, which is Jojo Rabbit, and it has some detractors for trying to use comedy in the context of the Holocaust, just as Life is Beautiful does. Roberto Benigni, addressing this, has said that laughing and crying both come from the same place in the soul, and that the point of storytelling is to find beauty. You get access to beauty both through laughter or perhaps through tears, and that if those are both mechanisms that he can use to help you find beauty in the film. I like that description, and that resonates with my experience in the film. This is not intended to be a fully historically accurate representation of what happened in Italy or in concentration camps during the Holocaust. Benigni felt like that was not his place. He was not in a position to be an authority on representing the actual experience of the Holocaust. And the film early on is introduced as a fable. I think it's helpful to see it as a fable rather than an attempt at historical representation. Although the fact that the events that are depicted here do have historical context, I think makes them more poignant. And again, I think that in some ways this film is quite comparable to Jojo Rabbit from 2019. Life is Beautiful also has a great musical score, which also gave the film another Oscar, so pay attention to that. And the comedy is really, really delicious and well done. It helps to showcase Benigni's talents. And if and when you find yourself laughing in this film, think a little bit about that relationship between humor and finding beauty, as Benigni has suggested. There are a number of things that I encourage you to watch out for as you watch this film, and they're mainly several themes that are picked up at different points in the film. The title, Life is Beautiful, comes from actually a quote by Leon Trotsky, the famous Marxist that was exiled from the Soviet Union. He was in exile in Mexico and was awaiting his impending doom from Stalin's assassins when he reflected a little bit on his sure death, but also said that it helped him to recognize how much life really is beautiful. So that's a bit of the background context on the title. So seeing the positive in challenging situations is probably the most straightforward theme of this film. One of my very favorite aspects of this film is that it is just so full of life and energy. So in addition to optimism, which does pervade it, you can't get away from the energy that Benigni brings to this role. And it makes you feel like the film really is very full of life. Some other themes. One is that I think the film helps us to understand the value of a human being, the value of any person. In the film, the main protagonist, Guido, imagines himself as a prince, and he imagines his love interest, Dora, as a princess. What happens to your courage and to your resolve when you start to think of yourself as a prince, as someone that has ultimate value? How do you treat someone differently when you imagine them as a princess? Think a little bit about the way that they value each other in this film. We also have, as humans, a remarkable ability, I think, to blind ourselves to what other people are experiencing, to shy away from empathy because sometimes it's very, very difficult or even painful. There's an important character in the film, a German doctor named Dr. Lessing, and in some ways he helps us think through that particular theme of how could the Holocaust even happen if people understood what was really going on with other people? How do we shield ourselves from what other people are experiencing? Dr. Lessing also loves riddles. That's one of his character attributes in the film. He loves thinking through intellectual puzzles and trying to solve them. What is the relationship of a riddle to the film? It's an ongoing motif that goes through much of the film. Another way of asking that question might be, what is the riddle that this movie is trying to solve? One of my favorite lines in the film comes from Guido's uncle. He says that God serves men, but is not a servant to men. What is the difference then between being a servant, which is a condition of limited freedom, and serving out of your own choice and doing so with delight? When does an act of service ultimately transform into an act of love? There's one scene in the middle of the film where Dora, the female lead, decides to board a train. That's not necessarily an act of service, but I think you could see that particular act as an act of love. Another question the film raises for me is, what does it mean to have hope and faith? Why should one believe in the possibility of miracles? If we have hope and faith and believe in miracles, how does that change the way we act? If we believe that life is full of wonder and is not fully in our control, we might be freed to take risks because we no longer have to take ourselves too seriously if our fate is ultimately not in our hands. Guido in this film takes a lot of risks. He takes more risks than most of us would, in part because he believes in possibility, in potential, and in living every moment fully. And I think that joy and faith to live every moment fully is something that almost everyone will take out of this film. Now, for those of you that have seen other Italian films in this series, you might notice some subtle references to scenes from Bicycle Thieves. There's also an important father-son relationship in this film that reminds me a lot of the relationship in Bicycle Thieves, or perhaps the relationship between Alfredo and Salvatore in Cinema Paradiso. Life is Beautiful is a very apt title for this film. It is at times sad, but it is at times very, very, very joyful and quite glorious. And I think that for me, Benigni is able to ultimately achieve his goal, which is to help the viewer find beauty. So enjoy Life is Beautiful.